Who should be the priority number one recruit for Syracuse basketball in 2025?
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on this week's Poll Friday, on a Saturday, because yesterday I did a 11-minute mini podcast on Eddie Lampkin staying with Syracuse and his commitment, I asked the question, who should be the number one priority recruit for Syracuse basketball in 2025? That was this week's Poll Friday on a Saturday. I gave you guys 4 choices, 3 of which are individual players, and then 1 was other. So the choices were Kiyan Anthony, Sadiq White, Tyler Jackson, or other. As I mentioned, another could be guys like Matt Gilhool, London Jemison. There's a lot of players that Syracuse basketball is going after in 2025. You just have to go after a lot of players and then hope that you get a few of them to stick. That's kind of how it works with recruiting. They're not going to land everyone, but throw as many darts as you can at the dartboard, right? So anyways, you guys voted. There were 397 total votes on Twitter and YouTube, and the winner was Kiyan Anthony with 75% of the vote. It was an overwhelming majority of you guys, considering it was 4 choices that were given. And I agree in this sense, and I disagree with you in another sense. If we're talking about the number one priority recruit in terms of potential optics, like I don't mean any disrespect towards Kiyan Anthony whatsoever. He is a very talented prospect. He is a consensus 4-star recruit. Most recruiting websites has him as top 50 in the country. Maybe he does rise to a 5-star at some point because he was one of the standout performers last week. However, I don't think he's the best player that Syracuse basketball is targeting right now in 2025. He is not the best. So from an optics standpoint, landing Kiyan Anthony is certainly important. You want to get someone who is the son of a legend at Syracuse. I get that 100%, and don't get me wrong, I would certainly be very, very happy if Kiyan Anthony were to commit to Syracuse. But the best player that Syracuse is targeting in 2025, at least that's publicly available, is Sadiq White. Sadiq White is the best player that Syracuse basketball is targeting in the class of 2025. He is a 6'8" forward from Charlotte, North Carolina. He attends Myers Park High School. He's the best. He is a consensus 4-star recruit as well. I believe another website has him as a 5-star. And when I had Sam Kaiser on from 24/7 High School Hoops, he was on the podcast last month, I want to say, when I did the 2025 recruiting update. And I'm going to do more 2025 recruiting as the summer goes along. I asked him which player out of all the players that Syracuse is targeting as of that moment is most likely to become a 5-star. And he said, without question, it's Sadiq White. So in terms of optics, I would say I agree with you that Kiyan Anthony should be the number one priority recruit. But in terms of getting the best player in the class that they're targeting, it is Sadiq White. Now, to learn a little bit more about Sadiq White, I'm going to talk about him after this. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and Gametime is what you should use to buy tickets. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off, and I'm sorry to the New York Knicks fans out there, but if you're still interested in going to an NBA Eastern or Western Conference Finals game, I highly suggest using Gametime, and at this point, we might as well start talking about the NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. And sorry if I'm jinxing your team, but it looks like that's what's going to be the NBA Finals. So if you're interested in attending an NBA Finals game, you can also use Gametime. My favorite part is I get to see the view from my seat before I buy. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you purchase. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on this week's Poll Friday on a Saturday, I asked the question, who should Syracuse basketball's priority number one recruit be? You guys voted 75% of the nearly 400 people that took part in the poll said that it should be Kiyan Anthony, and I agree with you from an optics standpoint that you have to listen. If you can't get someone who was the son of a former Syracuse legend, then that's gonna hurt. But in terms of who the best player is, it's actually Sadiq White, even though Kiyan Anthony is still a very talented prospect. So that's what we went over earlier. As far as a little bit about Sadiq White, as I mentioned, he is a 6'8" forward from Charlotte, North Carolina. He attends Myers Park High School. And when I had Sam Kaiser on the podcast, he said that White is also by far and away the best defender that they're targeting. So in terms of defense, he is the best. And he's one of the best in the country in defense. Last year, he averaged 2 blocks and 1 steal. And also in terms of scoring, he can certainly score. He averaged 17 points and 6 rebounds per game in high school. He shot 67% from the field, which is highly impressive. Perhaps the only knock on Sadiq White and why he might not be one of the top 10 players in the class, to be completely honest with you, is that if you look at his three-point shooting last season, he was a grand total of 0 for 4. So this is someone who doesn't really shoot the three ball. He needs to work on his range, but he's highly efficient from inside the three-point line. He averaged 17 points per game. He's a tenacious rebounder and an excellent defender. He can boost that three-point percentage. I highly suspect he will be at some point a 5-star recruit. Now, Sadiq White recently said this about Syracuse via Adam Zagoria. He said, quote, "Those guys have been consistent with me since day one, since they started recruiting me. Just the genuine love they show. The relationship that we built has been very, very strong at the moment, and I'm just continuing to build with those guys." So I know there's been some turnover on the SU coaching staff with Jerry McNamara leaving to Siena, and then in comes Dan Engelstad from Mount St. Mary's. But it doesn't seem like it has impacted the Sadiq White recruitment that much like the Matt Gilhool recruitment. Here's the thing. When I did the Kiyan Anthony podcast, I mentioned that Sadiq White, his odds of committing to Syracuse, they were in 4th. But listen, it's still early. And also, as I mentioned, the gap between what they were saying in that number generator, the odds generator, if you will, on On3, the gap was about 10% between 4th place and 1st place, which I believe is South Carolina. I would not be surprised if North Carolina also gets involved, considering that's where Sadiq White is from. But from that quote, it seems like, hey, there is genuine interest from both sides between Syracuse and Sadiq White. If you want to know more about Kiyan Anthony, who I talked about in the beginning, you should check out the podcast, which I will leave a link in the description below. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more in Syracuse football fans for those that are very optimistic. I suggest you betting Syracuse to win the ACC at plus 4,500, especially if you have Syracuse winning 10-plus games. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back, everyone, into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we're wrapping up this Poll Friday, and I'm going to keep making the joke because I'm corny. This Poll Friday on a Saturday this week's question was, who should be Syracuse basketball's priority #1 recruit? And from an optics standpoint, I agree with you guys that it should be Kiyan Anthony, but in terms of the best player, I said that it should be Sadiq White. Now, as far as some announcements, there will be a Will Nixon full podcast. I decided I'm going to make it a full podcast instead of 10 minutes. Hope you guys enjoy that. So that's going to come next week. And I still have some other things planned, but nothing that is really official. We're still waiting some news as well. So that is it for this week's Poll Friday on a Saturday. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications. And just a quick reminder, every Monday afternoon, I will propose a question both on Twitter and YouTube. It is the same question that you can vote on for at least a few days, which serves as the Poll Friday question. So just be on the lookout for that. And thank you so much for tuning in.